Hey everybody, your old pal Shawn here. We have a great episode for you today. We're going to be exploring the idea of what it is to be kind. We're also going to talk about fifth generation warfare. We're going to talk about how to move the needle forward on issues that we really like and what's helping or hurting our causes. But before we get started, please remember, if you like what we're doing, make sure to like this video. Share it with as many people as you can. Leave a comment, helps the algorithm. And if you're in a good financial position, please consider donating to our givesendgo.com/SZP, because that is going to, anything comes in, it's going to go right back into the podcast, into editing, into projects, into different materials used for the podcast and related projects that are coming up. I want to have a very high level of production quality eventually, and we're not there yet. There are certain projects I have in mind. They're going to be very time consuming for me, and if I could somehow improve the production quality and raise the visual appeal up, then that's more likely to get these projects traction rather than me with cameras and microphone in a room, white wall. You get the picture. All right, now let's get started. Years ago, I had many different ideas of what it meant to be kind. You know, I thought if someone asked you for money, you would loan them money. I thought if somebody wanted to hang out and go somewhere that I didn't want to go, I thought it meant, well, why would I resist? Why would I fight reality? I don't have a strong preference anyway. I just don't want to go there. I'm not going to make waves, just go with the flow. I thought that being kind was being very agreeable, not arguing. But there was always something in me that kind of wanted to fight with that. And I'll tell you what I mean. Let me just make sure my phone's off in the rare event that someone's going to send me a message. All right. To correct that, my phone isn't off. I'm actually going to use it as a reference today, but the sound is off. Anyway, what I wanted to where am I going to begin with this? All right. So I thought at a certain point that being very direct was the way to go. That, for example, I saw two friends talking. One was very attracted to the other, and he kept saying, oh, I'll take you to Jamaica. I'll take you to Dominican Republic. I'll take you here, take you there. And she's just smiling, not really responding. And I thought the good thing, the kind thing, so he doesn't waste his time and so she's not uncomfortable. I thought in my vast ignorance that the good thing would be to say right at that moment, you know, clearly she's not interested. She's not even looking at you. She's turning away from you. She doesn't want to go to these islands. Just leave the girl alone. Now, of course, she felt okay. She felt okay with this. He felt upset, and rightfully so. The way I had done that was very thoughtless, uncaring. In my mind, I thought, hey, I'm saving both of them time and kind of shielding her from having to deal with the discomfort, so I'm doing them both the service. That was very wrong. At another point in my life later on, since 1997, when I consider myself getting on the path, when I started to have money that I could put into books or courses or different things, I thought – Well, over that course of time, I spent time with various different teachers, a lot of private citizens whose names won't come up. I took many courses, read many books, went to seminars and events of various kinds all around. And at certain times, my approach was go really extreme in a certain, and I didn't do this consciously, but I would go pretty extreme in one direction, try and get a good handle on it, apply whatever I'm learning in that particular seminar event or what from that teacher or whoever. And then what I eventually noticed looking back was that I would find something that was very contrasting. And so instead of maintaining lessons from that, I would kind of abandon everything and then go extreme on that. Because I didn't want to be half in one world, half in the other. If it was a very contrasting message, I figured, okay, I'm really going to lean this way. And, sometimes things would zig and zag. Anyway, under one of my teachers at a certain point, there was a group of, shall I say, more, I'll call them like an inner circle group, of which I was one of a number. And the idea for these folks would be you'd be asked, okay, how quickly do you want to improve? And the speed is going to be brought about by a certain intensity of situations you're going to find yourself in. And of course, being the very, very arrogant person that I was, I'm like, okay, level 10, full speed ahead, let's go. I don't care what the cost is. And there was a certain perfect storm of events in my life that led me up to this. And I went from, long story short, it worked for me. It wasn't quite a tough love approach. It was very friendly in a certain sense, but it was tough love in the sense of, well, you're in this situation now and there's no escape. So now you have to either give up hope and just abandon that you're going to get anything out of this, or really apply the shit out of whatever you're trying to learn. So I'm applying the techniques and complaining the whole way, but I'm really doing it. And you know what? It worked for me. In relationships, for example, I used to have very solid structures. I thought, I'm never going to kiss anybody unless they never kissed anyone before. I'm never going to be intimate with anyone unless they're going to be with me forever, because I had all this insecurity. I was very jealous, very overprotective, I was so jealous when my girlfriend's dog licked her leg. I love dogs, but I want to kill that dog because that's my leg, right? So that's how jealous I was. I had many of these structures, and I had other life experiences that I just wouldn't want to face. I wanted to pretend that I was already through them and beyond. And because I had temporarily went blind in one eye for 3 months, had an eye infection, I just stayed in the darkness all day. I didn't really have a regular job. I just had a part-time gig at the time. And I'm looking down at the floor, and I started to become aware that there were many, many feelings that I wasn't facing. And at the same time, I also had a couple years of challenge brought upon by diet and different things that kind of kicked me out of martial arts. Martial arts was like my backbone, right? But I was just getting worse for years, and I was getting beat up and banged up. And every time I try and do a move, I got hurt and did thousands of repetitions like this. And I was like, well, what's going on? I used to be pretty decent. So I was in a very vulnerable situation. All of a sudden, I make this choice, level 10, full speed, and I had to face years of emotions that I locked away. And I was stuck in a situation that would grind me up uh, and confront me with my jealousy, my feelings of inadequacy, my sense of being overprotective, my vindictive streaks, my resentment, a lot of things. And I couldn't escape this. Well, I could have just left, but I thought, I got to get through this somehow. And it was really, really not comfortable. At the time, I remember I used to recount the story to people. And every time I just had such a visceral level of emotion. But, and I had such exquisite level of detail of memory. Like every second of this drama was important to me, right? Now, having been a long time ago, that part of the story ended about 15 years ago. But at that time, I could have recounted every second of what did he say, what did she say, what happened, where did this go, what was I thinking, what's going. But I went through it, and a lot of my insecurities and doubts and fears and everything went away. Still tons of work to do. I still had a lot of self-hatred that I would work on for years after that. It took me another 7 years to put that mostly to bed. Once in a while, I might observe a pattern if I make too many mistakes in a row, but it's almost nothing compared to what I went through. The point being, I really saw improvement from that type of scenario where I was very uncomfortable, to say the least. All-consuming thought process of how miserable my life was and what a wretched being I was, right? But I got through, and a lot of the things that haunted me for years were no longer issues. Now, when I think about it, it's going to sound cliche, but I can see the pattern of understanding as it would like blossom and as I would get pushed through certain challenges and inner limitations. And I just thought, okay, well, this is really interesting. This is cool. And I became so enamored with this that I thought it was really kind to have this kind of approach. Now, I didn't think of it as like a tough love, quote unquote, kind of thing. I thought of it as, hey, you want to understand more. And so I'm going to show you things that you've been kind of ignoring. And that was the pattern with this teacher in this group. A lot of times you would just, hey, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this. And it was your job to apply the techniques and work through the insecurities that you became aware of. Well, I was doing this with regular civilians, and it came across as mean or bullying or very harsh sometimes. And I thought I was doing them a great service. I thought I was being really kind at this moment. I thought, the right thing was, I'm okay with being the villain in your story for a little while because someone was the villain in my story and it worked out. So my thought was, you might be hurting now, but then you're going to work through some big challenges and you're going to be happier and suffer less for the rest of your life. So I thought I was doing, in the long run, a great service, even if in the short term it seemed very bumpy. Well, come to find out that this approach that worked for me scarcely worked well for other people, especially with larger issues. Almost everybody I'm not going to say it didn't work for anyone who had big scale things, but most of the people that I'm in touch with that were doing this kind of thing ended up not in a better situation. I'll say that. Often worse. And so that was my idea of what it was to be kind at a certain point. At another point, I thought, another way to be kind was just for me to shrink in the sense that, you want something? Okay, we'll go with what you want. At different times I had friends move in and I'd give them a place to stay for free. I remember one roommate I had. This is not a knock on that person. This is a knock on my understanding of how best to support this person. I would, hey, no rent, no chores, nothing. Once in a while, hey, I bought a ton of extra bananas. If you want some bananas, go ahead. I bought a ton of extra chicken. You want some chicken, go ahead. Sometimes this type of thing. And I thought I was being really helpful. But what I didn't realize is, and I'm not saying the following because I think I'm some great person or did great things. Obviously, whatever the intention was, it wasn't helpful. There were different times when I had given people money and I thought, okay, this is going to help you out of a bad situation. All right. I figured, hey, I could do without. I'm comfortable. I'm paying my bills. I'm not in a dangerous spot. So I have a little extra. I'll help you out, get you out of your difficult scenario. And I thought that was being kind. What I came to understand later was, well, sometimes that is kind. I remember one time someone took me in as a roommate for a few months and helped me out there a lot. And that was, my idea was, okay, I'm going to get in here for a short time. I'm going to take up as little space as I can, be very friendly, very agreeable. And the first opportunity I can move out, I'm going to move out. And that's what I did. And I thought, it's really good to receive help. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give help. And so I was giving free guidance to dozens of people. I'd be at this time working 56 hours a week on average. And every free moment I'm answering messages. Oh, I would do this. I would do that. I would do this. Or, here's some money here. Here's some money there. Oh, come stay with me. I'll help you out. This kind of thing. I thought this was really kind. What I didn't understand was sometimes almost everyone that I gave any kind of money to ended up in a worse situation because of it. It didn't help. It didn't end up chasing away a bill. There was always a bigger, worse thing right behind. They never ended up in a better scenario. And often I found it enabled them to have this pattern of trying to get other people to solve their financial problems. And that was me being wrong. This isn't them. They were in a difficult time and I was rewarding certain patterns that weren't helping. So was the staying with me or getting the money or doing the favor or anything really a help to them? Was any of that kind in the long run? And I submit no, it wasn't kind. And I just had so many, I had so many instances of this where I thought I was being the good guy and I wasn't. I thought sometimes it was giving the advice, but people, a lot of times they didn't want the advice. They wanted my attention. I didn't get that. And the advice didn't really help. A lot of times it just hurt and pushed people away. Other times I would give money. Other times I would help out with something, and it always seemed to hurt them in the long run, which really bothered me. And I had this kind of in an exaggerated scenario. So one of I call him my first teacher in a personal development path, I'll say, was also a best friend of mine at a certain point. And he was going through years and years and years. I'll say probably 14 years since we graduated. 14 years of challenge, of trying to make progress and it's not working, and just working, not having hobbies, not having interest, just spending all the free time trying to support other people. Whether it was a relationship didn't want to be in, but couldn't afford to go out on his own, whether it was family and large, extended family, and he's trying to take. Poor guy just worked himself to death until something broke inside, and he's no longer with us. And it's and I just saw that he was trying to be a good person the whole time. He would always tell me things like, "Oh, I'm putting the weight of the world. I'm trying to carry this burden for the other people." I'm like, "Well, can you get help for this? Do you want help for this? Can we distribute?" And he'd go, "No, this is my task alone. This is my task to bear. I'm here. I'm supposed to do it." And it just destroyed him. And since that time, I've had this kind of story happen over and over and over again with people that I cared about. And that really struck out that not only was the pattern hurting them because it was shrinking them, it was building pain and bitterness and resentment in them, but it was also training the people around them to be more predatory, more abusive, to push boundaries even farther. And I saw this in some of the organizations that I spent some time studying in, where I'm sure began with great intentions, and eventually too many opportunities would begin to accrue, and people in vulnerable states would make a perfect storm for, I'll just say, an unfortunate circumstance. I saw this over and over again. And then I had more examples presented to me. So, for example, what is it to be kind? Is it to try and shrink the world around somebody so that they're not exposed to any words or slurs or threats or ideas or speakers or situations that are uncomfortable? Beautiful intention, but that makes that person very fragile and easy to be hurt. It's like when you stub your toe as a kid, it's such a big deal. But when you're an adult, you've stubbed your toe hundreds or thousands of times. It's not a big deal anymore because you're accustomed to that. So which is being kind? If a child played in the dirt, played in the mud, running around real sweaty, and going to go to a like a formal dinner for school or something, and they don't want to change their clothes, they don't want to take a shower, and you're like, "Hey, you gotta take a shower. Gotta take a shower." "Oh, no." And you try and make a game out of it. You try and joke with them. You try and let them know, "Hey," but at the end of the day, they don't do it. And because of that, maybe you get reported to Child Protective Services because, "Oh, your kid's in filthy conditions and they smell." And all of a sudden, the family's in great disarray. Well, which is more kind? Finding some way to get them clean. And I'm not proposing violence or of any kind, but a little more of a sterner position to get them in, or CPS worker, potential adoption or orphanage, very messy circumstances. Is that more kind? Is it more kind to just let the kid do whatever they want in the moment at the cost of the long term? If someone is high risk for, say, heart disease, right? It's in the family, it's in the and the build of the person, they're larger, they're carrying around more weight, diet. And at some point, is it kinder for the doctor to say, "Oh no, you're wonderful the way you are. There's nothing you can or should do to try and improve your life. Just go on." Is that more kind because the person's going to leave feeling okay? Or is it, you're high risk. We need to get you to lose weight. And we need to get you start having some more real food in your diet. We need to come up with a plan so we can get your health back on track. Now, that might be a very uncomfortable conversation, but simply go on YouTube, and it's full of people who've had that conversation and turned their lives around. Which is the more kind, to take care of them in the moment or to support them over the long term of their life? Here's another example that I came across. All right, say someone is in palliative care and you want them to maintain as much independence as they can for as long as they can. So do you just do everything for them because for you it would be super quick and easy? Or do you unfortunately, even though they have to struggle, they might have to fight to do it, do you let them struggle through to get some of their things done so they can maintain a level of independence for longer? Which is more kind? We always like to think that we're doing the right thing. And so often, it's an ancient phrase. The road to hell is paved on good intentions. Because we always think we're doing the best thing. And I tell people, even the most sadistic, monstrous individuals in the world, they don't go, "Whoa, time to fuck the world today." No, that they often think they're doing something. And I study evil people, right? At very least, they think, okay, well, I'm mocking the nonsense that is life, or I'm seeking vengeance against life itself, or I'm relieving pain, or I'm getting this fix, or this person was a problem in society anyway. Whatever horrific justification they might have to do terrible things, it's not this like cartoonish idea of like a villain. Mwahaha, we're going to do evil today. No, they're doing what makes the most sense to them with the information they have. And that's the bottom line. Is it good? Is it always good? Is the result always positive for them in society? Often not. But we have to face these things. So often we think we are on the right track, doing the right and beautiful things. And it doesn't work that way. Now, this leads me to another discussion. I was talking with a friend of mine, Eleanor Strong. You can find her work at The Bottom Line with es.substack.com, for instance. We are both on a very similar path right now. We want to eliminate division. We want to bring people together. And she's super articulate, genius communicator. So I was just reading one of her posts and I asked her if I could reference this in a podcast. She listens to this, so appreciate that, Eleanor. And let's take a look at this. So at the top of the post, she has I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give you the gist of certain segments of it. But she has a graphic that says, I never unfriend people over politics. And then there's one column and it says, I don't unfriend people over stuff like this. Should we levy another school tax this year? Is the maximum building height for this zone appropriate, or should we alter it? Do we need a light rail for our city? How much of our state budget should go to road upkeep this year? And those are examples of political things that you don't unfriend people over. And then there's another column, and it says, here are some examples of non-political issues. Are gay people human beings? Should women be paid the same as men? Are Nazis bad? Is extortion bad? Are war criminals bad? Why can't presidents abuse power? Are black people bad? And then the comment is, I unfriend people over stuff like this. And that, by the way, this isn't Eleanor's opinion. This is an example of a conversation that's going on. So let me be clear on that. And then she goes on to talk. And she says basically, yes, we should unfriend people at times, say some folks, because so many issues go far deeper than politics. They're really issues of human rights and whether it's okay to cause harm to some groups of people. And if people are against human rights, then of course you wouldn't want to be associated with those people. And unfriending them is the minimum that you should do, or so the argument goes. Here's the thing though, and I'm not going to go through the whole article. I'm just going to touch on the beginning so we can speak on this. I suggest you read it for yourself because she's a really great writer. She continues, sometimes, or even a lot of the time, the idea that the people you're friends with on Facebook are in some way against human rights and want to harm others is a projection you're making onto them, not reality. At the very least, it's not what they actually say. And by extension, probably not what they actually believe. Let's take one of these not political issues. And in quotes, she says, are black people or insert other racial or ethnic group bad? And then she says, I was having a conversation with a work acquaintance of mine a while back who said that she definitely unfriends people on Facebook who persistently say Palestinians are bad and should be exterminated, murdered, or genocided. She won't associate in any way with people who hold such racist beliefs. Then Eleanor said to her friend, wow, is it pretty common that people actually tell you they think Palestinians are bad or inferior or should be exterminated because of that? That's crazy because I've debated the whole Israel-Palestine issue with many people over the years, and that's a very rare thing for me to hear. In fact, I don't think I've even heard it once. And then her work acquaintance said, well, you're right. It actually is rare for people to say that outright. But when they start cloaking their arguments in terms of Israel defending itself against terrorists or claiming that Palestinian terrorists hide themselves in civilian areas to attract Israeli military, I know that's masking racism. After all the terrorists hiding behind civilians thing isn't true if you look at the facts. Eleanor responded to her friend and said, well, is it possible that they think the terrorists hiding behind civilians thing is true? And that they're not actually racist at all and wouldn't want innocent people of any race or group to be killed just because of who they are. And then Eleanor asked, maybe you and they just have a different understanding of what the facts are. Here's another example from the article, and then I'll go into a comment. Quote unquote, are Nazis bad? And Eleanor says, a different acquaintance of mine, a Jewish woman, has said that she unfriends people who support Hamas in the Middle East war, or at least say that they can understand the frustrations behind their violent acts, even if they don't outright use the word support. because that's essentially supporting Nazis. And I can't be associated with anyone who thinks Nazis aren't bad. And then Eleanor says, indeed, Hamas's founding documents and some public statements they've made indicate a view that Jews are racially inferior, which is indeed quite similar to Nazi ideology, if not identical. However, Eleanor asked her friend a similar question to what she asked the other one. Do you actually find a lot of the people you debate on Facebook will say that they view Jews as racially inferior and that they support efforts by Hamas or anyone to exterminate or genocide them? And that Nazis are good or at least aren't all bad? I've discussed this issue with a lot of friends and acquaintances who are more on the Palestine side of the war, and I don't think I've heard any of them say such extreme things. And her friend said, well, yeah, not too often, she admitted. Usually they'll say they weren't aware of Hamas's racist rhetoric, or if they were, they think it's just an administrative document from many years ago that most of Hamas probably doesn't believe anymore. They think Hamas's purpose is just to represent an oppressed minority, and they think that's ultimately a good thing, and they understand why they'd be upset and fight Israel. Still, she continued, I don't really buy it. I think they're just saying that as a cover because they're anti-Semitic, and they just don't want to admit that because they know I'm Jewish. And similar to before, I asked, well, is it possible they're not anti-Semitic, and that you and they just have different understanding around the facts of who or what Hamas is? And I find this is a great place to bring up this idea. We have these issues that we care so much about, and the Israel-Palestine conflict is an enormously important issue. And I think every life lost is a tragedy. So I've been looking around for resources to try and understand how could I be more effective in trying to address division in the world. And Eleanor actually recommended a book to me, Habits of a Peacemaker by Stephen Collis. And, I'm reading that book right now. And one of the habits is to understand how little we actually know about a situation. Let me give you an example. Because we care a lot about certain issues, we want to fight on the side of righteousness. You want to be with the rebellion. You don't want to be with the evil empire. You want to be with the Avatar and his friends. You don't want to be with the Fire Nation. You want to be on the side of a good team. I do too. And because of that, and because we want to be good people, we want to see ourselves through kind eyes, and we want to support those we care about. We can easily end up in these very complicated situations where we don't hear other perspectives. We are already coming to the fight. We are already coming to the situation ready to fight. We have our guards up. We're defensive. We're anticipating attack. And if someone asks us or says something contrary, it feels like an attack. It feels like us and our ideas and our values are being assaulted. Particularly because over the last couple of generations, we've been so focused on sensitivity and awareness of the fact that everyone's fighting inner battles you don't know about, and we don't want to make their lives harder, and everyone has rights and feelings and should be respected and should be allowed to have a voice and should have representation and should be protected. And this is very good. But out of a sense of kindness, we've been trying to shrink the world around those we care about to protect them from things that may hurt in the moment, but may be very valuable later on in life. I mean, let's be blunt about this, okay? We don't know as much as we think. In this book, for example, he's a legal expert on the First Amendment, and he gets paid to read about the First Amendment and all of its implications in every field and industry. And he's been doing this for 10 years. And what he says is he doesn't he could write books and books and books and books and books on the First Amendment. But you know what? He doesn't even know 1% of all the different ways it could apply and be looked at, or what it could cover, what it may not cover. He doesn't even know 1%. And his entire career is dedicated to this. So this could give us some pause. Do you realize that there are experts who have different opinions on the best solution to any given situation? If you just walk down the health aisle, you'll see dozens of contradictory diets. If you talk to different personal trainers, some are all about CrossFit, some are all about barbells and dumbbells and free weights, some are about machines, some are about body weight and calisthenics, some are about zone 2 cardio and running for hours and hours and hours every week. Some people say that's terrible for you, and what you should do is hit high intensity interval training and very short bursts of extreme intensity, and that's what's going to be good for you. And there are economists with different views. There are doctors with different ideas on which medication, which treatment, which surgery could be right for you. And the thing is, everybody's hurting. Everybody's hurting. Everyone has a friend who's been hurt somehow, either economically, either because of their racial or age or gender background, because of whatever reason. And we care. We want to protect them. We want to fight for them. We want to make sure that they have a good future, that they're supported. Well, here's the problem with that. Sometimes by trying to protect what we care about, we make them more vulnerable to it. I'm going to use the trans issue again, and I hate bringing this up over and over again, but it's an easy one that many people are familiar with. Many people say that the questions, what is a woman, what is a man, are transphobic and evil and destructive. And you'll hear the phrase very often, a trans woman is a woman, no questions asked. And I understand where they're coming from. And as FDR said, if there's a new idea, you should try it until you see how it works out. And I'm not saying being trans is a new idea originally, but culturally, it's not been in the zeitgeist for very long. By not having room to discuss that and just keep pushing forward. Well, nobody's allowed to ask questions or try and understand it better. It's like if you don't know, you'll never know. And because you're not acknowledging that there are generations of people who've never met a trans person, never heard of trans until a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden it's a much larger phenomenon in the culture, they're pushing back because no questions were answered for them. They're not familiar with it. They don't know the rules. They don't get it. And so even good people who are just totally unfamiliar with what's going on, they have questions that they'd like answered. And if you could answer those, acceptance would be a far easier thing. But because we're so protective of what we care about, because, hey, these people they lack representation, they're marginalized. They're already going through a challenge. You don't want to make it worse by asking them these questions that point to insecurities. And it comes from great intent, but here's the thing. I'm just going to be blunt about this. If you're on the left and you have all these issues hey, anyone who wants any type of immigration reform is racist. Well, Obama wanted immigration reform. Or anyone who has a question about trans people. All right, they're a bigot, they're a transphobe, they're a Nazi, they're a monster. And same with abortion or any number of climate, any number of very important issues, war, pick a conflict, they're just monsters and you're not going to listen to it. Well, here's the thing. You might temporarily gain power, but that pendulum is going to swing. And guess what? All the progress you made is going to be wiped out. And hey, look, if you are a Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, maybe a Bernie Sanders or Marianne Williamson kind of voter, but no one's allowed to ask questions about your views or your policies or try and clarify how are we going to work this out as a society. If you're not going to have those conversations, well, guess what? Then you get Donald Trump. Then you get J.D. Vance. Then you get Elon Musk. And you end up in a situation where the pendulum swings and they wipe out and, in fact, overcorrect. So not just wipe out whatever you might have accomplished under the administrations that you've had, but wipe it out with like a sense of glee and vindictiveness in people because, hey, we weren't allowed to ask questions. We were called bigots, monsters. Well, guess what? Here you go. And then let's see how you like it. And that did not resolve anything. That has led us to this point. If only we could have had more conversations. Now, if you're on the right, maybe you're a Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, RFK Jr., Tulsi kind of person. When you swing the pendulum so far, but guess what? It's going to come back one day. It's going to come back and it's going to keep getting worse. It's going to keep getting worse. Back around 2016 or so, when Hillary Clinton said all of Donald Trump's supporters are like I think the quote is basket of deplorables. And it would try and make you think that there's just a small, evil, hateful group and that's all that would support this. But here we are where it's each side wins by a relatively thin margin that could change easily in the next election. And each time it gets a little more extreme because the other side wants vengeance because they've been called commies and snowflakes and idiots and predators and all kinds of horrible names. And the other side have been called bigots and Nazis and racists and Klan leaders and all this kind of thing. Each swing, it gets worse. And you know what? The lack of conversation brought this on. We never would have gotten this far if, as adults, we could have had this, we could have sat down and said, I don't really like this, but here we are. Here we are. I don't really like this, but vengeance is not a politics. A politics of vengeance is not going to transform society in a sustainable way or lead you to a future that you want. You can't pretend all the people you dislike are going to go away by the next election. You might win for a while until you don't. And that's That brings us here. If we could have had the conversations, greater acceptance would have come up, greater understanding, certain practical questions could have been addressed. I don't have a proposal on this, but here's an example of a conversation we could have had during the 2020 pandemic. We could have weighed, hey, are there preventative measures that can be taken? We could have weighed, hey, there's a certain cost in childhood development and education that there's going to be. We could have weighed, hey, should we have had a longer lockdown to get a battle plan for this and see what the other nations are doing? Should we have maybe locked down for a month or something? Should we have considered some other impacts like deaths of despair and all of this kind of thing? Because if we had some of these conversations, then we never would have gotten to such an extreme place today, but we just ignored it. And we just pretended that nothing happened. Okay, this is just a new normal. This is how it is. If people weren't demonized for asking questions, we never would have gotten here. And now how do we get back? By seeing people as human beings. And we have to understand that we live in unprecedented times. I took some notes here so I could reference something. So everyone is familiar with kinetic warfare. That's bombs and bullets and missiles and people sneaking across enemy borders and setting traps or setting things on fire or doing physical harm to another population. That's kinetic warfare. But we live in futuristic times. There's not just kinetic warfare. There's also economic warfare. Now, this could take the form of tariffs or cutting supply chains or creating new regulations or new taxes or sanctions on a country, for example. Political warfare might be doing different things at a legal international level, or trying to silence your opponents, or trying to get them deplatformed, trying to limit their political influence, trying to paint their constituents as subhumans, for example. There's information warfare. A good example of this would be the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I don't know which side of this you fall on, but if you just look at it strategically, the Palestinians and Hamas cannot win a kinetic war against Israel. But what they can do is they can do different things to get an overreaction, for instance, from Israel, or at least a perception of one. Get them to overreact, get them to create horrible scenes, and then get them to begin to lose funding from the West and lose the hearts and minds of people around the world. And that's an information kind of warfare. But here's another kind of warfare, and everybody is engaged in it now, whether you know it or not. In 2016, Russian actors, and I don't mean performers, I mean groups in Russia, they started basically 2 social media groups, largely based out in the same area. And one was a pro-Muslim group. And the other was an anti-Muslim group, basically. Long story short. And it was run by these Russian people who were pretending to live in Houston, Texas. And what they wanted to do was orchestrate two events that would be at the same location at the same time so that these conflicting groups would come into contact with each other. And guess what? It happened, and it almost turned violent. I'm not pretending the U.S. isn't doing this. We're doing this all the time. And there's even more to understand than that. Look at the apps on your phone, okay? Many of them owned by very large companies. These large companies are paying teams of psychologists and mathematicians and really smart people to try and make it more addictive, to try and improve the algorithm so when ads come up, you have to buy, to try and get you to spend more time on their programs. Everyone is fighting for your attention, fighting to give you their view of the world. The other day, I just happened to put on the subscriptions tab of my YouTube. And, I try and follow people all across the political spectrum. And I would see the same event covered completely differently. I would see the same event. And to be honest with you, I didn't even watch the videos. I was just reading the headlines. And they would say, oh, Donald Trump is a coward for doing this. And then Donald Trump is a genius war god for doing this. And it's like, what's going on? Yeah, and you would see, oh, and this economic thing is going to sink the world, and this economic thing is going to elevate us to a new golden age of supreme prosperity. And every one of us is acting, whether we know or not, in fifth generation warfare. Every major country is doing this. Every major country is this sounds ridiculous. They're creating memes to make the division we have even worse. They're sending people to different universities to become professors, to radicalize people against the nations they're in. This sounds very conspiratorial. It sounds ridiculous. But we're fighting in a new age. And we're not just, again, good guys versus bad guys. The idea is to confuse people as much as possible. You see, when we have a very black and white view of the world, just like I was so sure I knew what was kind. When I had a very black and white view of the world, everything was simple. I knew, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing what has to happen. But over the years, I ended up farther and farther in the gray with, I don't know what's right. I don't know what I think is the final destination for many issues. I've become so aware that, you know what? I probably can't write that many chapters on tariffs. So I probably don't know that much about it. I can't write that many chapters on the Ukraine and Russian political dynamic over the last 500 years. I don't know enough. I probably couldn't write that many chapters on race issues or trans issues. I could write something, but the idea that we think we're so informed, that we're willing to hate one another over, that we're willing to cast aside brothers against brothers, sisters against sisters, parents against children, off of, often we couldn't even write a page or two of straight information, let alone is it the right information, but straight information about a subject. We might be able to include anecdotes or stories or something, but straight data, probably not. Most of us, we can't go in this kind of depth, but we think we're super informed. In an age where information is so vast and being every data point is being interpreted across a vast spectrum of perspectives. And this isn't leading us in a better direction. Now, I remember years ago, I have this friend. I'm not going to say his name. He wants to be anonymous. Left-leaning dude. Very left-leaning family. Goes to a great university. Famous for really high-quality programs. And I started to hear him complain about the situation and the culture there and how, and I kind of wrote it off, to be honest with you. I'm a bit older, and I thought, well, you know, it can't be that bad, you know, just general bullying or, you know, people who aren't nice in school or whatever. I thought everything was exaggerated. Well, little did I know, a few years later, I would be hearing about this university being known for being extraordinarily radical. And he related to me that a former friend of his, who's a pot-smoking hippie there, but he was picked on so much for being a white male, for instance, that he was traumatized, and he eventually got pushed aside, and he became a neo-Nazi. He was a hippie, and he became an extremist by being insulted, being denigrated, being called something over and over and over again. When it didn't fit. And then finally, you know what? Now I'm your enemy, and I'm going to become everything you say I am. And that has led us to this point of extreme division. We don't want to condemn our chances of trying to have a better world by demonizing vast swaths of a population that we could actually work with if we would build bridges, if we would open up and have some of these discussions, if we could realize, hey, there are extremists. Now, Daryl Davis and Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and many other very powerful leaders have proven that even extremists can be won over. They can open their hearts. They can be de-radicalized, and they can become allies. But I'm not asking any of us to do that level of work. Instead, we need to realize, yes, there are extremists. Totally. But chances are that good conversations, consistent friendship, positive relations can move that person into a more friendly disposition. I didn't take many things seriously. You know, for fun, once in a while, I would hear like a conspiracy person talk. And they would say, oh, the world's ending. And, oh, right now it's happening. And, you know, yeah, right. After you hear the thing for 20, 30 years, it's like, okay, when's this coming? I thought we were already being rounded up 30 years ago. What's happening, right? But not conspiracy related. I'm not taking a side on this, but I underestimated how different areas on the political spectrum were getting more radical than I realized. And after I found out about my friend's university that he went to, I became aware of other pockets of extremism on both sides. And you know what? I'd never see them reported. I would only see them reported on the opposite. So if it was an extreme left group, I'd see it from a right perspective. You would never hear it reflected. And then the argument is, well, people on the right, for example, aren't calling out the extremists or the KKK or whatever. But I've seen with my own eyes on left-leaning networks that happening. I thought, At the same time, I saw the same phenomenon. I would see right-wing people who I'm sorry, I would see left-wing people who were doing very wild and extreme shit that I thought should get national news. And you'd only hear about it on right-wing perspectives. And there's a lot of this idea that we're not addressing the own vulnerabilities of the groups that we may be hypothetically constituents to. We're not addressing, yes, there are extreme people in groups that the whole group isn't extreme, but there are people in there who may have very radical views, who have maybe had very intense or traumatic experiences, or maybe just that's their disposition. There might be people like the Joker who just want to burn the world down. And we could certainly do with having more people say, hey, on our side, this terrible thing is happening and this is happening. Now let's look for at least some good from the people we've been demonizing, because we can recognize sometimes that there are people on our side who can be a little extreme too. And here's something that an idea that I often had trouble with. So when I was in third grade, I had a teacher, and she really expected a lot from us. A teacher, great, wanted us to be better. But she wanted us to do a diversity thing. And by that, she wanted us to go through our family tree, talk about our history, where we're from, and pick some nation where that's in our lineage and try to give some type of brief presentation about that. And, it didn't make sense to me. I never did one of those ancestry kind of tests, but the three main nations that I know my family are from, Ireland, Germany, Czechoslovakia. And now it's Czech Republic and Slovakia. I get it. But it never made sense to me why somebody would be so proud to be Irish, for instance. That's the one. I ended up doing a poem from Ireland. And I thought, what's so great about being Irish or German or Czechoslovakian? Or I didn't get it, because my idea was, well, you know what? In every culture, there have been people who did cool things. But there's also a lot of people who did really shitty, terrible things. And so what's so great about the culture? Like, yeah, it might feel like home. You might want comfort food from your old nation, or feel at home with a certain architecture or natural landscape. But I never really got, and my thing is like, okay, and if you're from there, you're born there, so what? It's not like you did anything. You just coin flip ended up in these regions. So it never made sense to me to be proud of your particular gender or race or culture or whatnot. It never made sense to me. But today, the more, it's like you get a medal for every different group you could be part of. And often it's viewed, the more vulnerable these groups are, the more prestige you have in a certain sense. The more moral authority certain groups attribute to you. And I just never got that. I'm not saying I'm right. I just never understood it. I can hear, oh yeah, these people were proud, but yeah, some of them at a certain point in history, maybe. But big deal. I could point to a lot of scumbags. And it didn't click. But we're destroying each other over these things. And the issues that we purport to care for, we're sabotaging, because we're not even giving the issues the chance to be heard in a good light. We're not even presenting that. We're not even taking some of the common questions. Let's go back to the trans thing, what's a male, what's a female? Hey, I'm not saying this is the responsibility of everyone in the community, but some of the leaders compile some information, get some answers, and distribute those. And then when you could say, hey, this is what we're going to do with immigration, and this is the answer to your question. When you can begin to address the fears, the insecurities, the doubts, the lack of understanding that people have, instead of demonizing them for not already knowing, not already being aboard, not already being part of the clique. This is very like Inquisition-esque, where, oh, you have a mole in the wrong spot, that must mean you're in line with the devil. Oh, you like to wash your hands and be clean, that sounds like witchery to me. Someone needs a burning on the stake, we got him outside. Like, we have to stop thinking that we are so righteous, because some people aren't. And the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. We're all capable of being darker than we really want to admit. And we are all capable of marching people to hell on our road paved with good intentions. We might think we're supporting one group while simultaneously we're oppressing another, and we'll claim to be the good ones. This is not a road forward. This is not and I understand. It's worth a shot, as FDR said, new idea has to be tried. Well, guess what? Super polarized. And now we have technology and different information sources and more people involved and different depth of conflict and war being waged for every human heart than we've ever had. Have things been politically divided before? Have there been civil wars before? That's happened. But the complexity of the modern landscape, the myriad of enormous challenges that we have over our heads that we're just ignoring, and we'll speak to them. We're not going to do anything. In fact, we're going to sabotage them because we're not inviting more people to come into the tent, to ask their questions, get your answers, and become an ally of this greater movement to try and improve, end this war, end this poverty, help people who are displaced or seeking asylum or wanting citizenship or wanting more recognition, wanting more legal protections. We could get so much better. We could move in a more productive direction if only we would take a step back from thinking that we know everything and that everyone on our side is all good. And when you realize, hey, there's a lot of information that I don't have, that doesn't mean that the other information is all correct, but it means a lot of people are operating off of that information. We like to oversimplify things. When you see it in black and white, hey, people who don't agree with me are evil. That makes your life simple. I agree. And by questioning that, by seeing enough examples to cast doubt in your own views, that's a very uncomfortable thing, but there's such a level of freedom. This is why that it brings. This is why I've been recommending that I had suggested lists. I've repeated them many times. I'll do it one more time here. If you are on the right, listen to 3 podcasts featuring each of the following: Destiny, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske, Bill Maher, Jon Stewart, The Young Turks. All of those people have big audiences. And while you might not agree, you would see, hey, all these folks aren't wildly evil. They have vastly different information. Maybe their idea for how different strategies in the world are going to work out But they got a lot of support because the mainstream people on the left aren't evil. If you're on the left, you might want to listen to Glenn Beck, Glenn Lowry, Tucker Carlson, Patrick Bet-David, Brett Cooper, Jillian Michaels, people like this. And you'll find out, hey, how can people of different ethnicities support this? How can a heavily Democratic supporting lesbian woman vote for Trump when she is a friend of the Clintons and cried when he got in office in 2016? What isn't Brett Cooper worried about destroying her womanly rights? What's going on? And I'm not saying everyone's information is correct. I'm saying lots of people have a different perspective, and it's not coming from hidden evil, hidden anti-Semitism, hidden racism, hidden what. But I will tell you, if we don't start having the conversations, and we just keep demonizing the commies and the Nazis, the bigots and the predators, yada, yada. If we don't start building bridges with the people on the other side, guess what? We will end up in a far worse place than you can imagine. We will end up in a very, very dark scenario. We need to have some humility in our hearts to enter into the gray zone, to realize there is other information out there than what we received. Yes, there are extremists, but as I point to, Daryl Davis had a lot of success getting people out of the KKK. Martin Luther King faced great extremism. And there's a reason why he's hailed as one of the greatest heroes of the civil rights movement, because he was so effective. What we've been trying in recent years hasn't been working. It's been taking us to hell. And we need to care about the issues that matter to us, care about the people and groups that matter to us enough to win them more support, to be able to hear some of the ideas that other people have. And while you might not like them, while you might not agree, you might come to realize that, hey, these people aren't evil. These people often have aligning values, but the information they have, their worldview, and the strategies with which they want to serve those values, that could be entirely different. So often we think we're dealing with someone who's against the human rights of a particular group. And while there are elements to that, the mainstream is certainly not. They're not against human rights. They're serving similar values to you, more than likely, but operating out of completely different sets of information. If you find out that information, you'll understand that they're not monsters. They might not agree, they might not be right, but there's a big, big difference between seeing someone as a monster, as a terrible, horrific, subhuman creature, and seeing them as a well-intentioned person who maybe has the wrong information or different information. That is a big difference. We need to begin to open up and realize that we're playing a part in a new era of warfare. And our words, even our thoughts of how to think about ourselves and how to think about the people who are currently on the other side of the aisle. Every one of those serves the end of war or serves the function of peace. And we need to bring this newfound awareness into our lives. And we need to make the decision. What direction do we want to take the future in? Are we going to continue applying a failed strategy of demonizing people that we have to work with, who will eventually be in power again? Or will we begin to listen to each other? Begin to hear the fears, the doubts, and the insecurities that they have, to begin to come up with answers to their questions so that we can begin to head in a better direction. Yes, sometimes they might be poking fun at us. Yes, sometimes it might be a little mean-spirited if they've been hurt. Might be messy in the beginning. Think about how messy it had to be for Daryl Davis, a black man, speaking at Klan rallies. Think about that. And take up your courage. I'm not saying put yourself in a dangerous situation by any means. I do not recommend that. He's a very brave man. But take up your courage to begin to hear the perspectives of different people. We need to start coming together. We need to realize that one another, we're a part of the greater human family, and we have to make this work. The politics of division is not serving us. It's not taking us in a better direction. It's taking us to the place where our nightmares come true. All the things that you fear the most are the result of hating your neighbor, of not talking to them, of not listening to their concerns, of not taking their fears and doubts seriously. Sometimes we could be very reactive because we're not quite prepared. It's like a person who never climbed the side of a cliff before could be very nervous. But once a person has done it so many times, especially at the same difficulty level, they're not that nervous anymore. Or it's the same thing. Once you hear these ideas, as I said, I gave you different lists. I also recommend Sam Harris on the left, Douglas Murray, or Thomas Sowell on the right. Off the top of my head, there are more people who are excellent examples. I'm just not thinking of them right now. But listen to 3 full podcasts from each of these people, and then just follow them every now and then, once a week or so. Watch a short clip, just to see what they're thinking, just to see what's going on, and you will have made great strides in eliminating darkness from this world. You will have made enormous gains in the pursuit of peace and the service of every issue that's important to you. If you can't hear difference, that's without attacking somebody. If you can't hear a question without attacking, that means we often don't know enough to answer those questions. So we'll just say, hey, you're a monster, and write them off. But this is an invitation to go even deeper into knowledge of the subject that you care so much about. I'd like to invite you to work for a better world, work for a brighter future. Realize that we don't know as much as we think, and that there's more information out there than we realize, and that other people are operating based off of that other information. consider that if you want to make progress, you can't demonize all the people you're going to have to work with to gain that progress. If you want to condemn your issues, if you want to guarantee that everything you love is going to be destroyed, then keep doing what you're doing. Keep hating on people, keep unfriending people that you could win over, that you could build bridges with. Keep doing that. But that's only going to make them more radical. It's going to push them into an echo chamber and push yourself into one as well. Is it truly being kind to the people you love to demonize others whose support they need to advance their futures and build on their ambitions? Is it truly kind to the environment, to trans people, to the immigrants, to the people on different sides of wars, to give up the peace talks in your own life and to demonize those whose collective thoughts hold all of our fates in the balance? We have to understand that we're all participants in a type of conflict that is more advanced and complex. We have companies doing everything they can to seduce us into buying their products and watching their ads. We have politicians doing everything they can to get us to vote for them, to contribute to them financially. We're inundated with information everywhere from foreign actors who are trying to get us to hate our own nation, our own brothers, our own sisters, because if it would serve their ends. Or will you fight for peace? Will you stand up for a better world and a shot at a better future? Will you pursue the easy path of maximum destruction for everything you love? Or the hard, narrow path of hope and of a better future and a realization of the potential of everyone in the greater human family? We must not let the spirit of hatred poison our hearts against our family, our brothers and sisters. It is by deciding that we will work for a better future, that we will pursue better, that we have the chance to build better lives and a better tomorrow. Okay, that's the show. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, please share them with me. I love to hear what you think. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Get this message out to as many people as you can because we need it. We're fighting against enormous odds. And conflict is what the algorithm's based on. But we can find a way through. All right, everybody, rock on, party on. This is Shawn, signing out.